Hi, my name is Kent Lee and I teach computer science at Luther College. In this series of videos, I'll be talking about data structures and algorithms with Python, which goes along with the text that I've written with my co-author Steve Hubbard. I would highly encourage you to go out and get this textbook and read it along with watching these videos to get the most from these topics. Okay, so we're going to finish that hexdump application that we were working on before. There's a couple things I want to be able to do. I want to be able to read a command line argument, and I want to be able to open a file in binary. To do that, I'm going to do a search, which I've already done here, to figure out how to read command line arguments. And so if I take a look at it, I did a search for command line arguments Python. And within that, I found a link for Stack Overflow, which is a place I go often. And I find that sys.argv is going to give me command line arguments. So if I want to use the sys module, I'm going to import it. And I'd probably like to find something out about that sys.argv. So I'm going to go ahead and print sys.argv just to take a look at it real quick here. And this is what I see printed. I see a list printed with two entries in it. Now, the first entry is the name of the program, hexdump.py. That's what I'm working on. The second entry is actually because I went up here to debug, and I went to debug environment and entered hexdump.py. If I get rid of that temporarily here and run this again, I'm going to see it's just hexdump, the name of the program. That's the first that's always the first entry in sys.argv, and any command line argument that I might want to pass in, I can type in here into this debug environment, and then when I run the program, that will be the second entry in there. Okay, so I'm going to write my code. I'm going to comment that out. This is incremental programming, by the way, that I'm showing you just by writing a little bit of code and testing it. I'm going to check then the length of sys.argv, and if that's equal to 2, then I'm going to assume that the file name that I'm going to work with is an argument to the program. So the file name is going to be equal to sys.argv sub1. And otherwise, I'm going to prompt the user to enter the file name. So I'm going to say file name equals input of please enter a file name. And so then we'll have the file name either way. Now the other thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to read from a binary file. So again, I did a search, Python, read binary file, and I find on Stack Overflow, here's an example of reading from a binary file. Now, I know in Python 3 that bytes are objects, and I'm not necessarily going to compare them to a string, but I can look at the length of a byte object and see if it's 0 or not. That would be the same kind of thing that we're doing here to read from a file. This is the read from a file pattern. I do like seeing that on Stack Overflow, where you read one byte to begin with, and then while it's not the end of file, you do stuff with the byte, and at the end of the loop you read the next byte. This is the way I like to see reading from a file when we don't know the number of things that we're going to be reading. So I'm actually going to just take this code and we're just going to copy and paste it. I'm going to leave out the try and finally here, but we're just going to take and copy and paste that right into our program. I do want to open the file. I need to fix up the indentation of this, so I'm going to highlight it and do Shift Tab, which will fix the indentation of it. And I'm going to open the file. I guess the file is called F here, so I'm going to say F equals open, and we're going to provide the file name, and we're going to open it with RB, which is the way to open a binary file. Okay, so once I've done that, then I can read through the file here. I don't want to do this other stuff that I've got in here already, so I'm going to just go ahead and go up to source and do toggle block comment to comment that out. And now I'm ready to do stuff with the bytes that I read here. So this will read all the bytes of a file. I actually know that this will cause a little bit of a problem here, so we're going to say while the length of byte does not equal 0, and I could just go ahead and print each of these bytes just so that I can see that this code actually runs, and it prints out all the bytes that are in the file. There's all the bytes that are a part of this file. So all ASCII characters that we can see that are being read at this point, starting with the import sys at the top. There's the new line characters. Okay, so I want to do something with each of these bytes, and I'm going to print out the words in hex. I want to print out 8 bytes at a time in hex, or 4 bytes at a time in hex, 8 characters. And we're going to print 4 of those per line. And so we're going to need to keep track of the words, and the word is going to be a string that we're going to be building, and the ASCII line that comes at the end of one of these, you'll see what I mean here in a moment, is also going to be an empty string. So you'll see exactly what I mean here in just a moment. Okay, so rather than printing the byte, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that. I'm going to start building the words that I want printed, which are going to be in hexadecimal, and I'm going to then build up the line that I want to print as well. So the word, to print or to give me the word, I want to take the byte and I want to convert it into an integer. So I'm going to get the int val from the byte, and it turns out that in int there is a method called from bytes that I can call, and I'm going to pass in the byte to it, and it needs another parameter as well. It needs to know which style that I want to do the conversion for. I find this out by actually searching for Python byte convert to int, and again Stack Overflow helps me out with this. Now there's a little bit of stuff with timer up at the top, but I get down a ways here in int.fromBytes, and it shows me byte order needs to be specified either big endian or little endian. Doesn't really matter in our case which we do. We'll specify big endian here. So big endian is the way we're going to create it. I want to convert that to a hexadecimal value. Now I might ask, okay, well, how does this end up working? And I can go in the hex. I can go into the into here and just try out some things with hex into the Python shell. And when I call hex on, say, 97, I get 0x61. I do want to call hex on, say, like 3, and I just get 0x3 here as a result. I want to make sure that I've got 2 characters for each of these hexadecimal values. They start at position 3 here, 0, 1, 2, start at position 2 and continue on. So I want to go from 2 to 4, and if the length of it is, when I'm done, is, so let's see here if I can do hex of 3 and do from 2 to 4. Let's see if there's any kind of error. Nope, that gives me just 3. So if the length of it is 1, I want to make sure I add a 0 at the beginning of that to get exactly the format that I want. Okay, so my hex val is just hex of the int val, and then I want to go from, take a slice of that from 2 to 4, and then I can ask if the length of hex val is equal to 1, then let's add a 0 at the beginning. Hex val equals 0 plus the hex val. So that fixes up my hex val. Now I'm going to add that to my word. Word plus equals, so if I'm going to write it out here, it'd be word equals word plus hex val. I often use the plus equals kind of shortcut with this, so I'll write that, but just so you know that they're equivalent, we'll just do word plus equals hex val, and that does exactly the same thing as the line up above. So that's building up the word. When the word gets to 8 characters, that means I've got 4 bytes within it. So after those 8 characters, I want to go ahead and print it. So I can look at it and say if the length of word is equal to 8, when it's equal to the length of 8, then I'm going to go ahead and print the word. But I don't want to go down to the next line. I want to stay on the same line and print a space. So end, if I pass in a keyword argument called end into print, I can specify how the line ends, and in this case I want it to end with a space so that I keep printing on the same line when I come back through again. I'm going to set word back to the empty string at this point, and then I'm going to be able to go through and print all the words within the file here. Let's take a look at it and see what happens when I go and run it. So if I look at debug.io, this is what I'm seeing printed here. Okay, so once I've got the words printing here, I would like to, after every 4 words, I'm going to want to go ahead and print a new line. So what I'm going to do is actually start to build up some ASCII characters that I'm going to print at the end of every 4 words here. So I've got this ASCII line variable that I've set to an empty string, and I've got this int val for the byte right here. I'm going to go ahead and make an ASCII character for that. So we'll just call this ASCII char and let that be equal to ASCII of this int val. Okay, and we're going to convert that into a character, so we're going to say the ASCII line is equal to, we'll do the plus equals that I've used already, plus equals the string of ASCII char. Okay, so that adds a character, whether it be a period or if it's an unprintable character or the actual ASCII character otherwise. And I've added to the ASCII line there. I'm going to ask if the length of ASCII line is equal to 16, meaning that I've gone through, let's see here, 4 words. So if it's equal to 16 characters, then I want to go ahead and print the ASCII line. And I want to print a new line at the end at that point, so I'll just leave it at that. And I'm going to set ASCII line then back to the empty string once again as I'm going through this. And when I do that, okay, so I start to see all the ASCII lines printed there. These are the ASCII lines that are printing. Okay, so I'm not seeing exactly what I expect to see for output here, and I'm looking at this and trying to debug it a little bit, and I'm seeing the ASCII lines printed out, but I'm not seeing all the words printed the way I expect them to be printed. So in looking through the code here, I've spent a little time looking through the code, and I'm looking at where the word is being added to, and the word's being added to right here. And when the length of the word is equal to 8, I'm going ahead and printing it. But I'm missing some of the data for within this, and kind of tracing backwards from here, I end up looking at this line right here and notice that I accidentally used 2 equal signs, and I shouldn't have done that. So what happens is that I end up with the data not being a multiple of 8, and I never print it again then if it doesn't get to a multiple of 8 here. So once I change that, then I see the output the way I'd like to see it here. Now, the only issue is at the very end of the program, I've got just part of a line, not a full 30 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 16 bytes, not a full 16 bytes. So I need to take care of handling that little bit at the end there so that I get that printed correctly. So once I get out of the loop, I've read all the data and I've printed all of the words that I've got, but I might have a partial word left, and so I need to take care of that. So I'm going to ask if the length of word is greater than 0 at this point, because that's going to tell me if I've got a little bit left to go ahead and print. If it is, then I'm going to go ahead and print that word, and I'm going to specify that end is equal to the space again to go ahead and print that word. Now I need to print, since I printed a partial word here, I need to take care of printing the rest of the spaces that I have over to print the ASCII line, and so I want to go ahead and do a for loop, in this case for I in range 16, I guess, minus the length of ASCII line. So if I've got a partial ASCII line that needs to be printed, I can print the spaces to get over there and then print it. So I'm going to go ahead and print a couple of blanks for every character that I've got in my ASCII line, 16 minus that, because I know that there's going to be that many blank spaces, and end is going to be equal to the empty string in this case. And then I'm going to check to see if I plus the length of word, if that's equal to 8, or a multiple of 8. So if I divide by 8 and the remainder is 0, I plus the length of word, another parenthesis there. If that's a multiple of 8, then I'm going to want to print an extra space, because there's these blank spaces that appear between every 8 characters for the word. So we'll print one extra space, and end is going to be equal to the empty string in this case. Okay. Once I've done that, I've printed the blanks, so I'll go ahead and print the ASCII line at this case and at this time, and that should finish it up. Let's see if I've done all my calculations correctly. So it looks like that seems to be working. I've got a few blanks to print here. It looks like I've got all but 5 bytes for this line. I print the correct number of blanks, and then I go ahead and print the ASCII characters at the end. By the way, 20 ASCII are blanks actually within the file, so that's what I'm seeing here. 32 is the actual number that it corresponds to. Okay, so I've pretty much finished this hexdump application. I will show you one thing that's kind of interesting to do. This is only for Unix systems, but if I go and look at in a terminal, if I were to go and look and see where Python is, I can say which Python 3 and see that it's in, for me it's in this location here, and I can take that and actually put it in the very first line of my program. Didn't mean to delete that there. Let's try that again. And I'll put it in a comment at the very first line of my program, and this tells $! And then that path tells Unix that that is the interpreter that I want to use to to interpret this file. So I can get into my bin directory if that happens to be in my path, wherever my path is. So I'm going to go into this directory here, and I'm going to copy that file, which is in data structures. What did I call it? I called it, there we can see it, it's in data structures, and it's just called hexdump. So I can copy that right into this directory that I'm in, and I'm actually going to rename it. So that's a move command, and I'm going to, in Unix anyway, I'm going to rename hexdump.py into just hexdump, into hexdump. And if I do a chmod +x on hexdump, then I'm going to be able to hexdump anything I want to. So for example, if I type hexdump here, minisat, I'm actually dumping the minisat program so I can see exactly what's in there. So you can see any binary file you want to and exactly what's in it at this point. So this kind of concludes the hexdump application here. I've written it as a Python program. I've actually created a command that I can use within Unix here for it. I learned how to read from the command line arguments, and I read a binary file to complete this. So hopefully you've seen a little bit about how object-oriented programming might work here. I ended up using my ASCII class here and converting the ASCII characters to a string, which called the string magic method to do that, which gave me exactly the characters that I wanted for my hexdump application that I was writing. We'll take a look at a drawing program next and see how object-oriented programming is used.